Good evening, welcome, and greetings all from the Ecumenical Christian Center, Whitefield. So, we are so excited for this evening to listen from two prominent speakers. Before that, I would like to introduce to you the moderator for this evening, Mr. Dondup. He did his Master of Commerce Entrepreneurship from Loyola College, Chennai. He served as accountant, administrator, and member of Tibetan Freedom Association in various Tibetan societies. He is presently teaching entrepreneurship for Tibetan schools in South India. So we welcome and invite Mr. Dondup to moderate this evening webinars. Over to you, Dondup.
Okay. Good evening, especially the distinguished speaker, Dr. Biju Varghese, and Geshe Mawangla, and all those who are participating in this important seminar. There is a saying in Tibetan that tragedy should be utilized as a source of strength. No matter what sort of difficulties, how painful the experience is, if we lose our hope, that's our real disastrous. So I welcome you all for this jointly organized seminar under ABCD, Asian Buddhist Christian Dialogue, jointly organized by ECC, Ecumenical Christian Center based in Bangalore, Office of Ecumenism and Dialogue, CBCI, Catholic Bishop Conference of India, New Delhi, and Tibet House, Cultural Center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama based in New Delhi. So today, the first speaker, Dr. Biju Varghese, has a long track record of service as a doctor in many of the army hospitals. So his knowledge, his input would really matter a lot at this time when the world is facing tremendous problems due to this COVID and many issues. So first I would ask Dr. Biju Varghese to deliberate, to have a kind of say on this important subject. I hand over this to Dr. Biju Varghese.
Thank you, Mr. Dondup. Good evening again.
Thank you. Thank you.
When Father Chandrakunel asked me to speak on this, it's been some time since we have been through this from when it started, and Father knows all our details, how we've been going through these things, and like you said, we may not be exactly privileged to have a tragedy, but then we may be privileged to learn from a tragedy. And I hope what we discuss today from my inputs is going to be beneficial to everyone. Well, just to give you a background, I've already been introduced, I am a doctor with the Air Force. I'm trained in surgery, and 2008 was the year when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. I was 37, she was 33, our children were quite young. Son was in second standard, daughter was in 5th standard. So we were a young family, and we were placed in Coimbatore, and I had just gone for a fellowship, a higher training in trauma surgery. Now, it kind of came like a bolt out of the blue, like in many cases. And it was tough. The initial diagnosis itself, adjusting to that, the treatment, going through the treatment, which is very major surgery, chemotherapies. Well, we withstood that with a lot of support. I shall dwell on that in some time. And what happened after that is in 2011, it happened again. There was a recurrence in the liver. 2013 recurred again. It recurred again in 16 and in 2017. And thank God that every time the kind of treatment that we got, the kind of expertise that we were privileged with, and of course, with God's blessings, she's hale and hearty now, and the children have now grown up to be a young man and a young woman. So, coming to how to cope up with this, like my topic is coping with cancer, which is, I think, a family stake completely. There was a priest whom we used to, in the church where we used to attend mass in Coimbatore, who told us one thing. He's a very simple man. He told us one thing, that there are three very important things. One is the medicines, the medical expertise which you are provided with. Second is God's blessing, God's kindness. And the third one is your own mental strength. So I think these are the three very important things which take us through any tragedy and help us overcome, find opportunities. Firstly, the medical expertise. In our case, of course, it was a disease, it required medical expertise. The scientific basis of how to go through this. It can be any tragedy. Any kind of tragedy requires a scientific answer to that. So it's not as if God hasn't equipped man with enough scientific knowledge to sort out a lot of problems which exist. There are scientific answers to that. We have to follow them. But not essentially all scientific answers prove right or effective in every circumstance. Like we are seeing even with the COVID, so many answers have been provided, but they've all ended up with more questions. Some have been partially successful, some have been called unscientific. So we need God's blessings. I think that's very important, that the answers we find for ourselves, after all, scientific answers are what we find for ourselves. So that needs to be supported by the blessings of God to bear fruit. And the process of going through all this is not very simple. It requires a lot of courage, grit, and that is where mental strength comes in. Now, a large part of this, in my topic also, I have called it a family take. Because especially in a situation like cancer in a family affecting the mother, it is the entire family which is going through this. And in our case, we were blessed because it is not only the four of us, but the extended families on my side of the family, on my wife's side, both were extremely supportive. We had a lot of help from our parents, brothers, sisters, who all did whatever they could personally to tide through these situations. My wife's mother was practically with her throughout the treatment with us, rather, staying with us and helping us while we could carry on with our daily routines. I could carry on, my children could carry on with their school, and we tried to make it as less troublesome as possible for ourselves, and hats off to them. So we came through that. But always we do feel very victorious in the first instance when we find that everything has gone well. But especially with this disease or with anything, I think in the world, there is no permanent solution to many things. Things can happen again. So that is what happened in 2011. Like after 2008 to 2000, by the end of 2008, the treatment was over. 9, 10, 11, 3 years, we thought everything is fine. She picked up a job again. I was working in another hospital, busy days, professional work, children growing up in Bangalore. Everything was fine, but suddenly again, a bolt from the blue. She was not symptomatic, but it was picked up on a scan, and then we had to go for a very major surgery again, followed by one more chemotherapy. So the atmosphere had changed, the situations had changed, but again, we are stuck with the same old problem. And as you know, every time one goes through this, the physical strength and the mental strength to withstand this is required at a much higher level. So that was the time Father Chandran Kunnil was there with us. Or rather, we were fortunate to be associated with him 2010 to 2014, we were in Bangalore. And during those days, she was unwell for good about, say, 6 months to 1 year total, going through the chemos. And then, of course, we got a very good advice that we should go for specialized radiation treatment, which was available again in Bangalore. So at every stage, without detailing further, I can say that at every stage we were privileged to have all these three inputs. One is the hard science behind what is modern treatment. Second is the mental strength, which I thought she was stronger than me. And probably that is what helped me to become stronger. I would think she was a much stronger person when we went through all this. Even now, she's much stronger to go through such things. She's a very optimistic person. And of course, God's blessings, which have abundantly been showered on us, which made us realize that there is much more. You can understand that, a family like ours where we were looking at professional success and financial success and things like that as very important things. It just highlighted to us that there are so many things which can go wrong, and so many things which you can learn out of all this. And one big learning for us was that there is much to be shared than what we think we can. We can actually share many, many more things than what we are doing on a daily basis. So for me, the big learning was that whatever professional capabilities, personal capabilities I have are to be shared maximally with whomsoever I can. And I really hope to do that. And I have been trying my best to do that in our service setup and even otherwise. As far as she's concerned, she did go back to working for a period of periods in between, but could not continue for a long time. And we also have the issues of my moving around. So she could not continue working for a very long time in any place. Right now, she's not working. She generally looks after all of us, and that is good enough. A lot of work for her anyway. So I think suffering builds a lot of character. It has improved a lot of things in all of us. And has given us the opportunity to reflect a lot on in what ways we can be better for the world, in what ways we can be better for ourselves, for each other. that's a big learning from this. So at this point, if I may take any further direction on what I should speak about further, because now we have shorter time. So if you could tell me what more I need to speak about, it would be great. Thank you, Mr. Dhondup. If you could come back and give me a kind feedback as to where we shall take this from here.
I think Thondupla has might be thinking that there is actually 30 minutes, and
Okay.
yeah, you can continue.
Okay.
Yes, for 30 more minutes. Maybe since I know the whole experience, I
Please.
remember that Sharon and Rohan, how they were also as children, this suffering. And how I came to know is that one day I saw that your son Rohan was in the catechism class and crying. And then I was wondering why, and then I asked him, and then he was also sharing with me. And also I saw that some of the experiences, like your daughter went because your mother came, I think, I mean his Grace, that
Yes.
their mother came with a head cover, and then she might have come to the school that way, and then others were ridiculing or asking why she is come up with that and all, so a kind of see the stress to the children. And so this became um, uh, an experience in this struggle, and children may not be knowing about those incidents, what is happening. So I was Rohan was crying and expressing, but I saw that Sharon was in a way withholding and uh, experiencing the pain within her. So maybe that would be, see, in this corona time, we are all suffering, and then we all have our own experiences of suffering. Maybe somebody of our relative, or they might have experienced this sickness, and then on the brink, and then so all those things. Maybe as a medical doctor, you could give us some highlights, how the faith or the support, how it is.
Yes, Father. Thank you very much, Father. Like Father said, the children did go through it in a very they were contrasting how they adjusted to that. Sharon was emotional at home. Rohan was not emotional at home. But then from whatever feedback I have received, and like Father said, Rohan was more emotive outside the home. Sharon was less emotive outside the home. So there was a contrast in their adjustment philosophies, probably. Like she would be very emotional, very my daughter Sharon. She would be very emotional and little cranky at home. But then the son was all happiness. And I have also observed, like Father, what you said. I have also observed very. Uh, it's been a learning, how each person in the family contributes to the stressor, how each person in the family tackles this stressor, helps the other person to cope up, has been uh, a learning experience in itself. I have always thought from his very young days, from his baby days, my son was, he was always a person who, when the four of us are together going through anything, it may be something as silly as everyone upset because the train is late, he would start singing something interesting or do some kind of a prank which everybody makes everybody laugh, and he would de-stress everyone, while my daughter would start getting very upset about the whole thing. But they are quite they behave in a totally different way when they are around with others. So now it's, with these inputs, I know that my children behave a little differently when they're around with me. with us, and they behave differently when they are elsewhere. So that has given a lot of insight into how families adjust. Well, in my case, how I adjusted, like the first time I was devastated. It was very difficult for me to accept the whole thing. And being a doctor, I did not need, even the surgical, what was seen at surgery was sufficient for me to understand what was happening, because I do similar kind of surgeries. So I was devastated. It took me many months and probably years to come out of it. Um, so, like Father said, in these Corona times, how we can draw parallels and differences, of course. You see, firstly, the major differences in Corona. The biggest difference is that we have to practice social distancing. It is very sad that there's a person who's unwell at home. There's a TV advertisement also on the government side which comes in Delhi. I don't know whether it comes everywhere, where they say if the person is not well at home, keep him in a separate room. Okay, give his food and don't touch his stuff and let him be there for 14 days, whatever. Now, that itself, that social distancing itself, is a huge stressor. Most of the time, Corona is not, going to kill a person or make him seriously ill. But the fact that we really don't know who's going to be seriously ill, it is not that the person who is infective is mild, so the person whom he infects is going to be mild. No, it's not like that. A very asymptomatic person, a person with very mild symptoms, can infect another person who may become very ill or even become complicated, serious on a ventilator. So that is why the very great importance given to social distancing, which is frankly speaking the only thing which actually works is social distancing. Now, we are all social animals. If we cannot even sit and pray together when there's a problem, it is a very, very big departure from the kind of sufferings, the kind of situations that we have been through. The kind of situation, the way we used to tackle situations, by getting together, by sitting with each other, by holding each other's hands, by praying together. Well, it is a very big departure from that. So that is why it is extremely important. Thankfully, the scientific solution to that problem of being aloof is probably things like the internet, which has helped us. Even this webinar wouldn't have been possible without a very good internet. So that's probably the scientific solution to that. As far as the disease goes, the scientific solution is still at large. We still have to find, we have only some preventive and probably secondary preventive strategies. We do not have the exact medicine for the virus yet. Then, of course, the blessings part. Well, there are a lot of theories as to why this disease has occurred, how this disease is going to transform humanity. In my humble opinion, we should look at it as an opportunity to realize that we probably don't have answers to everything, and that realization itself is a blessing. And like
Dr. Biju, I think the connection or something sound has gone. Dr. Biju, Dr. Biju, uh, just show like this signal. So anyone?
Tony, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Sure.
Anthony here.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Anthony, we can hear
Yeah.
you.
Uh, I had a personal experience. My nephew suffered from a peanut cancer. It's a pulmonary neuroendocrine tumor. He was 14 years old. Now, this youngster, like, he was hale and hearty, and we had a lovely time at home, and he was my eldest sister's son, and he was doing his, that time he was in 7th standard. Then suddenly one day he started coughing, and like usual cough, we treated him with the local medication. And then after a week, he started getting lump near the throat. Then we thought casually, we took him to the local hospital here, and they said, okay, it's after all a small lump, let's, and they took a portion of it. And then they said, let's do a biopsy. By which time we came to know that this is no ordinary problem. And then there was this subtle, the subtle shock which all of us had, like a child has a dreaded disease, and we came to know that there is no cure for this because this is a lung cancer, and that too happening for a 14-year-old boy. That initial shock was so stunning, it just takes the wit out of you. And, a gloom descended. And it's not a pain, it's so much, there's a numbness that we came to know that we may lose this child. Well, to make this story short, he suffered for about 4 years. He took all sort of treatment, went to Tata Institute, came back, did everything. He lost a lung also, but eventually he had to go. And the mother, she's in a service. Uh, she teaches in demands, and she teaches the mentally retarded children. And the question came to us, why this, she had to suffer? She's doing great work. So many mentally retarded children are suffering, and she's taking care of them. Why should such a thing happen? And we reached out, we prayed, we did everything possible. But eventually, this was it. And even till today, just this afternoon, we had a lunch together. We went to our sister's house because tomorrow is her birthday. But we don't talk about it, you see, because we cannot live in such a thing that everything is okay. Yes, we lost someone. No one can replace that absence. And, life goes on. And this is it. And coming to COVID, uh, you know, like we were driving down those areas where there is containment, like, Jai Mahal this side, Munreddy, Palya, all these places, and people still going about their work, and some carry on as if it is business as usual. And that is life, I guess.
Thank you, Anthony, for
Yes.
your sharing. I think Biju Varghese had come. And Dr. Biju, there is a question from Sakir Thomas. Dr. Biju, can you please tell us how did you keep a positive attitude despite being repeatedly faces reversals in health? That is when you are faced with reversals in life, how you cope up with such situations?
Frankly speaking, yes, it is coping up, but it is not that it was very comfortable. So if it is, if it is that, how do we go about comfortably through this? Well, it's not comfortable. But coping up, yes. Coping up is, again, I would reiterate the three things. One is the scientific answers to any problem should be available with you. That itself is a blessing. I was fortunate to have people around me who were the best in the world. We might say that we are in India, we are whatever, but believe me, we have the best answers in the whole of the world. And there is no technology which is not available in India. There is no knowledge which is not available in India to treat any disease. It is all there. It is just the access. I was very fortunate to have access to people, a very close friend of mine rather, who was a friend for me even much before this. He happens to be a medical oncologist, and he is a person who primarily gave me a lot of answers. Even though he's not the person who treated it all the time, he's the person who suggested all the answers. And uh, right now, whatever response we have had is from something called a Cyberknife treatment. That is a very highly specialized radiation treatment, which is applicable in certain cases. It's available only in 6 hospitals in the country and not available in even a single government hospital, including old age too. So this was suggested to us, and she responded to it very well because she had already undergone 2 very major surgeries and 2 other smaller procedures and chemotherapy. So we didn't want to go through the surgical options again because every surgery has its own big risk. So we were fortunate to know that there is a process like this which can help her out. And we also happened to be in Bangalore when it was really required, and Bangalore has this facility. So that was one. Secondly, like I said, the extreme amount of family support that we got, it was phenomenal. My brother was in Bangalore. Like I said, my wife's mother would come down every time whenever there was a problem. And a lot of extended family was in Bangalore. My service itself, there were people who were very friendly. My working atmosphere was very good. Nobody was stressing me. Nobody was forcing me. But that made sure that I could work even better. Frankly speaking, I have worked in my profession. I feel I have worked even better than what I would have otherwise. I took things more seriously. The results mattered to me much more than before. If I would operate, I thought I must give my best. So I think one of the most important things in coping is the science. What you get, what you give has to be the correct thing, purposeful, and oriented towards getting the correct goals. Second is the faith in God. Every time it has happened, the faith has only been reiterated, it has been reinforced. The requirement of faith has been, you know, we've been told again and again in very practical ways that faith is very, very important. And Father knows we have been in Bangalore under his spiritual care. My son was in the catechism group. He became an altar boy. My daughter was in high school at that time. And believe me, this is not the only medical problem we had. Father knows about it that during there was an accident in the swimming pool where my daughter fell down from a high board and she cracked both sides of her jaw. And this was all happening together. Both sides of her jaw were cracked. Fortunately, there was hardly any external injury, and she went through surgery. Her teeth were wired together. She couldn't open her jaw for 2 weeks. She couldn't eat anything. And even after that, she's been through multiple sessions of treatment. Imagine a teenage girl going through all that. But now she's okay. I mean, she's also been through her own personal suffering. So at multiple levels, this physical illness and trauma has acted on all of us. And in spite of all that, we have gone ahead and achieved whatever was optimally achievable, whatever is optimally achievable. My daughter took biology-based studies, and she thought she will try to emulate her father and become a doctor. In spite of my telling her it's not the best of times to be getting into the profession. But then she discovered that she's more interested in learning psychology, and she's now a clinical psychologist. She's just finished her MSc in clinical psychology, and now she is able to. In fact, I told her that she could join, but she's not here right now. But I think that has added a lot of insight to her own learning as well. Another thing which all this has made us is all of us are more accepting. Even my son, my son is a very good student. He was doing maths and physics, and he has even been very fond of Father Chandran Punel's writings and his, the part of science which he deals with. But somehow in his 12th standard, in spite of getting 95% in physics and maths, and all, he said, "No, I want to do commerce." So it was actually very difficult for me to accept that. But then I said, okay, if that is what he really wants to do, why not? He is doing very well. He's again in Bangalore right now here, but otherwise studying in Bangalore. He's doing very well. He's part of the Christ University business management, the theater, doing very well in studies as well. So overall, all of us have, I would think, come out quite strongly out of all this. And the amount of spiritual blessings we have received at every stage from various people, various people connected with religious institutions we have been associated with from the beginning. We have received a lot of blessings. And we were talking about Jorhat some time back. There is a seminary in Jorhat, a Don Bosco seminary. This is all much before all this happened to us. We were very closely associated with the priest there in 2005 to 2007, 2008. And even they came calling, they would even visit us whenever they could, when they would come to Coimbatore or to Bangalore. So we have been blessed with a lot of truly spiritual, dedicated people in our acquaintances, in our friend circle, in our social circle, who have always been with us, guided us correctly. The scientific part, yes, definitely. And I feel God has been very kind. It is with a much higher purpose than what we feel that we are going through this. I don't think we have still seen the final purpose of all this. Probably that would come when I have an opportunity to, or we all have an opportunity to go to a different milieu of life. Now, maybe in a few years, maybe very soon, whatever, I would probably leave the service, and then probably there is another kind of an opportunity for us to be in society in a different way. That's the way I look at it. So opportunities are everywhere. Even when you talk about this coronavirus thing, would anybody like to say anything in between, or shall I just carry on further?
No, I think maybe if anybody else has questions, please ask. Anyone? Maybe Dr. Biju, you, I think in our interactions, you once told me that, we live every hour, every day rather than, so I think maybe within maybe 2 minutes you can say, and then I will hand over to Dondupla, and then for the next session. So,
yes,
please.
Father. That's something which, which works. I think not only in going through something like this, anything which requires a long-term success, a long-term sustenance, requires a moment-to-moment involvement. Of course, we are all very interested in the final outcome of everything. When if you start a business, or if you start studying for an exam, or if you're going through a, I have a very good friend of mine who is a long distance runner who has even been going for the Boston Marathon. And personally, I also like a little bit of fitness and all that, and I do run once in a while. When we run long distances, I'm sure if anybody else is into this, you'll realize that we always look at the next step. The moment you look far, you start feeling tired. But if you just look at the next 3 steps or look down on the road and keep running, you'll just concentrate on the next 3 steps or 4 steps, and it keeps going like that. So we have to live by the hour. We have to live by the minute. If we concentrate on what is happening at that particular time, the next problem will present itself, may not present itself. It may be anticipated, may not be anticipated, but we will know how to go about it. Even while operating, like if you talk about surgery, what my profession, everybody, it is said that we have to take it step at a time. If we do the first step properly, the second step is likely to be very good. Like we start operating by cleaning and cleaning the patient nicely, the area we are going to operate. So if that is not done, it's not going to be very nice for the patient as far as infections go. The next thing is what we call draping the place. That is, you have seen all those sterile sheets which are wrapped around the patient, only exposing the area we operate. So that draping is extremely important, that one step. It may look very simple, but it's extremely important because you are gaining access to the relevant part which you're going to operate. And in the middle of it, you can't take it off. Once it's done, it's done. If you take it off, it's a very big problem after that. Okay, next is the incision. How you cut, how much you're going to cut, where exactly you're going to cut. So it is step by step. So every step counts, and we live even in the current coronavirus context, it's a step by step. Like, okay, lockdown 1 is one step, lockdown 2 is one step. Now we are sufficiently intelligent retrospectively, sufficiently learned in a retrospective manner as to what all could have been done right in lockdown 1, 2, 3, 4, and now whatever 5. We all know that a lot of things have been done. Some things were right, some things were unnecessary, some things were done improperly. And now we are at a situation like today only I got a WhatsApp forward which says when Noah opened the window and found that the flood has receded, Noah didn't go out himself. Noah sent a bird out first. So just because it is lockdown 5 and unlocking, everybody doesn't have to go out. We have to be more careful. So this is another step to be careful. So at every step, we need to do what is right. Okay, so we live by the hour. What I mean by we live by the hour is we do what is right for that particular hour. Most of the time, the next hour is going to present us problems which are manageable. I hope I'm...
Yes, thank you, Biju, for this wonderful, and I think it is a great soul-stirring experience. Every day we are encountering, but look the next 2-3 steps and go ahead with the life, encountering the problems. I think that must be the prayer in the Our Father, every day the food. So that I think I think that is a great way of saying. And then yes, I hand over to Thondupla. Thondupla, you were I think maybe some problems with the net and all. So I was just taking over. Can you see us?
Yes. 1 minute. Yes. Little bit now. Light was gone. Okay. Yes, Father. Very much. I'm alive, Father.
Okay. Then yes, maybe
for your highly valuable talk on this pertinent topic. And then the next speaker would be Geshe Ngawang Nugula. He is available.
Yes, yes.
May I hear his voice? Geshe-la, are you available?
Just switch on, Geshe-la.
Yes, I'm
Yes.
here. Yes.
Okay, Geshe-la, I would like to introduce a brief about Geshe Ngawan Nubula. Geshe Ngawan Nubula is perhaps one of the emerging, he is in the field of this Buddhist philosophies, and who has actually completed his studies from one of the largest monastery in South India, Seraj, and he has worked in many capacities over his service as a former director of Seraj Science Center, and presently he is the director of education of this Seraj monastery. So I welcome Geshe-la, and I hand over to you, Geshe-la, for your this valuable insight into this, how we are actually going to get an insight into this Buddhist studies, and your talk on this pertinent question and need of the time. So I hand over to Geshe-la.
Thank you, Tundubla, for your introduction. And I would also like to thank Father for giving me this opportunity to share some of my little understanding about Buddhist philosophy related on the topic that I'm going to present. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Biju for his sharing his experience of dealing or confronting cancer in his own family, and how he overcome, how the community was supportive. The support of the community has a impact on wading through this sort of challenges. So I think as Father Matthew asked me to come and present on from the Buddhist perspective on the topic that I had selected. I think this is a good opportunity, although my knowledge is very mundane, like we're at a superficial level. I might not be able to share much about the Buddhist understanding, but still I think this sort of interaction at this critical time is very important to share and to learn from each other. So I really appreciate Father for giving me this platform to be a part of this wonderful session. So I think Dr. Biju has already shared what I had planned to share. So my presentation will be mostly like a technical now. I think because Dr. Biju has already shared through his own experiences. So I think there's nothing much interesting that that's left for me to share, but I will try my best. Since Dr. Biju has shared that it's important to know the challenges that we are facing. If you know the challenge that we are facing thoroughly, then there's a way to overcome it. And then there's a that's how what I'm trying to present here, because the topic that I selected is about the suffering, right? And since from Dr. Biju's presentation, as well as some other comments that I heard from this session, everybody has faced this sort of a suffering sometimes in their life. So we have all we all have first-hand experience of suffering. So I don't think that I will be able to enrich you more on this topic, because each individual has already experienced and that know what suffering actually is. But there are in Buddhist understanding, as you know, the famous discourse that Buddha, the first sermon that Buddha gave is on the Four Noble Truths, right? So the Four Noble Truths, the first truth itself, Buddha talks about the truth of suffering. And then most of the time, people, those who are not able to study properly the Buddhist, the idea of Four Noble Truths, feels that Buddhists are more pessimist than optimists, because they are talking about suffering all the time. But that's not so. Buddha taught truth of suffering. Then the second, the noble truth is about truth of the cause of suffering. And then if he had only taught these two, and then he didn't, went further, then we can say that Buddhists are like pessimists. But since Buddha had taught the third and fourth noble truth, so he had already laid out the way out of this suffering. So, so they, in a way, I'm not going to touch the latter three truth. I'll just basically stick to the first truth, and then through that, I may be able to. I'm just hoping that I may be able to shed some light on how Buddhists look and deal with the sufferings. So the suffering, as you know, is the term suffering is an English term, but the actual Buddhist term in Sanskrit or Pali, it's called dukkha. So it's much more broader, or which has more meaning than the English term. So sometimes most of the times the scholars, Buddhist scholars, prefer to use Sanskrit term rather than the English term, because it is the Sanskrit term has a more deeper meaning than the English word suffering. So here suffering, Buddha has categorized suffering into three different types. I'm not going to touch the third one. I'll just basically introduce the first part of the suffering, and then the second level of suffering. The first level of suffering is known as suffering of suffering, which is basically everybody can easily understand. Everybody can easily comprehend. Even the Buddhists believe that animals are able to understand or feel the suffering of suffering, and then try to avoid from that. There are examples like in some scriptures, there are examples about animals knowing that if something hurts them or harms them, they will try to avoid or go away from them, that the harmful nature. So that's the suffering of suffering. And then the second level that I'm going to share is a little bit deeper, which we believe that only humans and those who have intellectual power is able to understand or comprehend. That is suffering of change, which is a little bit tricky. When I use English term suffering of change, it seems like just by the name, by the term, we will be able to understand it's a suffering. But that's not so. Most of the time, common people, like ordinary people like myself, most of the time we get deceived by that sort of a suffering of change. Let me give you an example. The technical example, or the example that's given in the scriptures most of the times are like when you are feeling in a hot summer, when you have it's very warm outside, and then when you come back to your room, it's very warm and sweaty. So normally, if you have facility, you will turn on AC or you will turn on the fan just to cool yourself. And then, immediately when you have that, cool breeze, you feel happy, right? So that breeze, or that the air conditions, the air is somewhat like the source of happiness. But here you will know that if you stay long enough under this sort of a condition with the the under air conditioned room, and then eventually you will feel uncomfortable, right? You will feel cold, and then you want to change and go back to the warmer place. So that shows that the suffering, initial happiness is not lasting. It will change. So we uh, we most of the time get deceived by this sort of a suffering in day-to-day life experiences. That's why we are not able to overcome, or keep uh, falling into that trap. uh, Let me give you one more example. I think the people, um, um, we are in the 21st century now. So I don't think the audience that we have here right now are not deceived by this sort of uh, things, but younger generations, particularly like those who are in their teenage, late teen, or early teens, or in their early 20s. See, the the 21st century right now, we are in a era of technology, right? And highly advanced technology, highly advanced you know information and technology. So uh, there are so many catchy gadgets out there in the market, right? So the 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 companies will promote their product with a very fancy kind of a advertisement, which attract our uh, mind, or and then we are forced to buy that. So till we get that gadget, we feel unhappy, unsatisfied, because we don't have that gadget we are longing for, we are carving for. And then once we get that, we feel happy, right? And then after a while, uh, when you get used to that gadget, your happiness will not last. Your happiness will also started to change. Um, and then that happiness, the initial happiness, will eventually uh, uh, change into suffering, because the company will come up with the new product, right? They will say this is a new upgrade now, and this is more fancier, more, so now you want to go for that one. So you want to upgrade with the company's the new product. So now you no longer have that sort of a feeling with the gadget. So you want to move on to a new one, and then this will go on and on and on. That's one example of a change of suffering. uh, Change of suffering actually means, although it's initially start with some sort of a physical or comfort, but gradually it will go into suffering. So what I want to remind here, not to the audience, that those who are participating here, because I'm quite sure that you all are well informed. So, uh, but those who are younger generation, those who are young, I just want to remind them that uh, the companies, like multinational companies, they are very clever. They know the suffering of change very well. So they are using that. They are taking advantage of that. So they know that if they will put out a, a product in a market, and then they will let the curving of the customers or consumers uh, grab that product, and then they will, maybe after a month or two, they will just change a little bit, and then they will come up with a new product, because the human nature of change of suffering will eventually get to that trap. So that's how they are utilizing that. So in a way, if we are able to understand the true nature of the suffering itself, you will have the benefit of not getting trapped in this sort of a uh, uh, this deceptions. So that's one thing I want to remind. And then I think other than that, I'm not going to go into the the philosophical part, which is very complex. And then with a limited time, I think uh, it will be more but rather I think uh, just one point that I want to remind, as Dr. Viju said, that you learn lots and lots from suffering. Although knowing suffering and trying to overcome suffering, you may not be able to completely uh, free yourself from that sort of a suffering, but at least your mental state will be boosted. You will be more prepared. So there is a positive side that you can take from facing those sort of a challenge. Even in Buddha's case, if Buddha had not seen the suffering of uh, aging and sickness and dying, we won't have this privilege of uh, his vast knowledge. So uh, that's one example. And then there's so many cases, like people you read. I mean, from Dr. Biju's presentation and others' presentation, you learn lots of things from facing the suffering with a more open-minded. And here let me just point out that Buddhist way of the Buddhist approach is uh, basically with the two different types of meditations. One is basically said like a concentration meditation, like where you just focus on a single point of that suffering, and then without uh, uh, analyzing it, just to stay focused on that part. And then if you are more, if your attentive state is more stable, and then you will apply the analytical approach to analyze the suffering. When I say analyze the suffering, you try to see what are the causes of that suffering, and then you will see that there's not only there won't be a single cause, there will be a multiple causes. So and and then you will try to see if there's a way of uh, um, cutting the cause and the suffering. And then if you see there is a possible way of solving that, and then the text says that you should try to solve that problem. And then in some cases there's a cases where it's inevitable to solve. So at such a time, at least you know that uh, it's inevitable for you to overcome. So it's better to have that knowledge, and then according to that you should move forward and try to plan. So these are the practical approach that Buddhists applied. And then uh, there are practice called generating altruism, where Buddhist simple practice is there, like a practice called giving and taking. That's also a very powerful practice. Normally, the practitioners, Buddhist practitioners, they uh, visualize the suffering of all sentient beings when they are going through some sort of a physical pain. They take that opportunity to visualize the pain of other beings, and then take all the pain as they are suffering, and then release, or give out their well-being to the others. So that's also one way of practice. And some Buddhist practitioner normally pray that they should constantly be in a suffering state so that they can practice. That's I don't know, I'm not that kind of a person. I cannot be in a constant state of a suffering, but there are practitioners who deliberately pray that they remain in a state of suffering, so that will remind them to be more uh, remind them to practice more, and then try to utilize that pain to generate more compassion to others. So this sort of I just throw out all the information on the table. So I think that's everything that I have already shared. And one thing I remember from Dr. Biju's presentation, as Dr. Biju has said that the treatment of the cancers, any sort of treatments are available in India. That I remember that Dr. Biju had said. And also, I just want to remind that India is a nation of traditional approach to deal with not only physical challenges but also mental challenges. So I think someone has raised just mentioned about Nimhans. I know some person in Nimhans. So there is vast opportunities in India where you can not just overcome the suffering of physical state, but also the mental state through different sort of training, mind training, especially like ancient Indian psychological approach is there. So I think maybe we can, focus more on those part in this kind of a particular situation where people are not able to meet one and one, but still are able to, share through their experiences and then through their practices to deal with this sort of challenges. So I think we are in the best country in the world where you have access to both physical needs as well as mental needs. So I think India has a huge responsibility to guide the world and share them that because the mental challenges are increasing all the time, the depression and stress and all these things. So India can take a huge role. So I just want to just remind you that I think you all know, but just to put this forward so that maybe in the future we will have a more interaction on that part of a topic. So that's all I want to share. And then I would, is there any questions or comments? I'll be happy to answer.
Thondupla, please take over.
Yes, Father, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. I think today we had a very purposeful and productive evening, a session altogether. I sincerely thank Dr. Viju Varghese and Geshe Ngawang for your valuable talk on the subject cited. And I'm sure the participants, the listeners have learned a lot in coping with the challenges in the life. And I also would like to thank the management of ECC Ecumenical Christian Center, Bangalore, headed by Father Dr. Matthew Chandra Gunil and co-staffs for your proactive role and really educating the general public in right direction. And I thank all the viewers, participants for making this online seminar a very productive and a grand success. I thank one and all.
Question answer session, and I think Minimal wanted to ask questions. So please, Minimal.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Dr. Hammer, for your wonderful session, and it was very inspiring. I have a question. I have two questions. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. One is you spoke about the gadgets which leads to suffering. You spoke about the companies which, okay, and that leads to. Then secondly, you said about meditation. When you do meditation, you recall what is the cause of suffering, and that will help you to reduce or find the reason. And okay, so firstly, did you mean that, did you mean when you spoke about gadgets, did you mean that according to Buddhist truth, fivefold truth, eightfold truths, did you mean that desire is the cause of suffering? And what message can you give to the youngsters today about suffering? Can meditation help them to reduce suffering or find the cause and reduce suffering?
Okay, so the first question you asked, like, is the desire the cause of suffering?
Yeah.
Yes, desire is one of the cause for the suffering. Most of the time it's the desire. And then, but I think there's a one important thing that we have to differentiate. Not differentiate, but, you know, to know that, you know, desire could be sometimes for the survival sake, right? But normally we don't differentiate. We are not able to differentiate between want and need, right? So if we are able to, educate the younger generation about what is needed and what is your want. So most of the time we goes after the want instead of need, right? So we want so many things which we don't need, right? So this is also because of desire. Uh, but desire, as I said, you know, need is also by desire, but that is necessary. For example, like, you know, we need food for survival. So that food, when we are hungry, we desire to have food, which is not a problem because this is for survival's sake. But but the problem is that we are not able to differentiate between what is needed and what is want. So if you are able to differentiate, I mean, if you are able to educate a youngster this between these two, and then you'll be able to, you know, I mean, they will be able to gradually overcome that. But the main cause of the suffering is not the desire. The main cause is the ignorance, right? If you, so through education you will be able to overcome the ignorance, right? So ignorance is the main cause. Because of ignorance, we are not able to differentiate between want and need, so we fall into the trap of desire that leads us to the suffering. So here when you say, like, will the meditation help? Of course it will help, but for doing meditation, first step is you have to learn, you have to study, right? You have to study how to meditate. If you are going to meditate on a particular topic like overcoming a desire, then you should know, you should study what is desire, right? And how to overcome it. After, so here when I say like analytical meditation, uh, analytical meditation is basically um, through reasoning, logic and reasoning. You give, you can do it yourself, like, you know, when you uh, visited a big mall in Bangalore, there are so many malls, right? So when you enter a mall, and then you will see lots of, you know, fancy stuffs all around. And then normally we are like you know, uh, side person, like who rely on our sight, eyes. So we catch lots of different things on the shelf, very fancy, very attractive. So all the time, even in my case, even in His Holiness Dalai Lama case, right? He one time he was asked in an interview by some of the reporter and asked someone like, "Do you feel attracted to things when you visited supermarkets?" His Holiness said, "Of course, yes. I when His Holiness said that when he saw these things on the shelf, he feels like, oh, I want this, I want this. And then immediately he uses his meditative powers, like, the experience, and then analyze, does he need that or does he want that? And then immediately he found out that he doesn't need that, he want that, so he stopped buying that. So that's how, the meditation will help. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thondupla, are you there? Yes, maybe you can ask one or two more questions and then you can wind up.
Can I speak further?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Is any other person who would like to ask question? Any viewers? No questions?
Yeah, no, I do have, yes, Gashela Norbu, you were in the Emory University, and it was one of the greatest interests of His Holiness Dalai Lama that, the Buddhist monks to be updated with the modern science. And you were heading the science and the dharma, and we had some interactions, some conferences, all those things. So what was the real interest of His Holiness instructing you not only with the ancient wisdom of Buddhism, but how this modern science could cope up with this ancient wisdom and complement?
Thank you, Father, for asking this question. This is a very important question. And I think in the audience, not many knows that, we were sent, selected monks were sent to United States to study science, modern science. So the purpose of, of this initiative is that, as I mentioned earlier, that the humans are facing lots of challenges in this century because of climate, as well as, this social stigmas sometimes, and then, cyberbullying and all these things are, happening now, which maybe 30 years before we don't have to face those sort of challenges. But now we are facing lots of different challenges in this world. So overcoming those challenges, there are methods that's there in ancient Indian tradition, which especially, like, particularly in ancient Nalanda tradition. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama always want to share this knowledge to the greater human community, regardless of their faith or belief. So he had already initiated to categorize the Buddha's teaching into three different types, the three different divisions. One division is known as Buddhist philosophy, and then second one is Buddhist science, and then Buddhist religion. So he had already compiled a text separately for Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist science and Buddhist religion. The goal is to introduce the Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist science part to the greater community so that they can benefit. You don't have to follow, or you don't have to faith in Buddha to study those things. You don't have to, follow faithfully Buddha to learn from those things. So he want to introduce these techniques to the greater community, and that's why the best possible way to introduce this technique is through scientific research. So he has already started invited scientists, discussion with the scientists, because for the past 30 years, His Holiness has, participated in different science conferences, interact with the scientists, and he also challenged scientists to do research on positive mental state instead of only studying the negative mental state, because most of the time in the past history, the psychologist studies anger, hatred, and all these things, but neglected the positive emotions. So now they have already started studying compassion, love, impact of compassion and love through scientific research. There are lots of papers coming out, so which will eventually benefit greater human community. And then he's also trying to promote the secular ethics, right? Secular ethics is also based on the what he believes is that he believes that the human nature is kindness or love. So that's what he believed. And then, but it has been neglected. It has been not paid attention for so many years by the educational system. So he want to promote this, and then he want to promote the basic human nature, and then make it more accessible to the younger generation, so that they will be able to understand that their basic nature is compassion. That's how we were sent to United States to study science, so that we can learn the method of science, doing science. And we have already established science centers in the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries here. We have already collaborated with the scientists, and there's already a paper out after the research paper has been published of collaborated studies. So yeah, so many things will come out of this project, mainly to enrich human knowledge, so that that will benefit greater community to become more harmonious. That's the main purpose. Yes, Father.
Yes, Dondupla, if you ask anyone else to be there, or you can make your own observations, and then maybe we can wind up.
Yes, I think now we are basically on time. I think it's near to 8. So if anyone is not any further questions, maybe we will try to wind up. So we had really a very purposeful and engaging conversation, a talk by eminent Dr. Viju Varghese and Geshe-la Ngawandubu from Seraje Monastery, for taking out your precious time and having insight into this, the problem that humanity is facing in coping up with many ailments, and our thinking perspective about the life. I sincerely thank both the eminent speakers for your valuable insight and talk on this pertinent topic. And I also would like to sincerely thank the ECC management headed by Father Dr. Matthew Chandra Gunil and co-staff for all your this proactive role in conducting such a need-based programs of such online seminar And last but not least, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the viewers, participants for making this program so interactive, engaging, productive. I thank one and all for making this program a grand success.
Thank you, Dondu, for moderating the this evening session. And I once again would like to congratulate and thank the speakers for this evening, Dr. Bizu Verghese and Gisela. I feel that this evening we get a primary resource or first-hand experience of what suffering is, especially when Dr. Bizu shared his family experiences and how they are coping with the sufferings that they have undergone. One thing comes into my mind, what the very famous and well known in the world, Charlie Chaplin said, "Nothing is permanent in this world, not even our troubles or suffering. And what matters is how long we can withstand and hold on, and the time eventually lead us and overcome the sufferings." So thank you so much for the insightful talks and letting us know in a very basic and in the simplest way what suffering is, how to cope with it, and how we can overcome it. Thank you so much. And friends, before we wind up, I would like to make one information or announcement that our next talk will be on June 11th, that is coming Thursday, by Dr. Nesin from Nimhans from Neurology Department, and another speaker, Dr. Dorji Raptan, who is the Chief Medical Officer of Tibetan Medicine Bangalore. So we look forward to meet you all even on Thursday evening. Thank you so much for your active participation.
Oh, I'm really